Welcome back to our program. As I said earlier, we're going to be talking about rural issues in America today. And I have two wonderful guests that I think you'll love. And I'd like to introduce both of them now. I'd like to introduce you to Ed Evans, who is the Discovery Education and 3M Science Teacher of the Year. Ed teaches at Mountain View High School in Welch, West Virginia. And I also have Dr. Caitlin Howley. She is the director of the Rural Education Center at Edvantia, and she's been with the organization for 11 years. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
It's great to have you on here. And I know both of you are very passionate about rural issues, and you both live it every day in the types of work that you do. And what I want to do is I want to talk about, for our audience, some of the stereotypes that people have about rural America, rural education. Caitlin, this gets you fired up, doesn't it?
A little bit.
What are some of the stereotypes that people have about rural education?
Well, there are a number of rural stereotypes in general that kind of feed into some of the stereotypes about rural education. The first kind of stereotype is that rural places are idyllic, that they're peaceful, that they're kind of pre-modern, that there's no conflict, that there are no racial or socioeconomic divisions. The other myth is kind of the myth of rural degeneracy, or kind of the deliverance myth, which is the myth that rural people are kind of brutish and volatile, and they have all kinds of antisocial characteristics. They're lazy, they're mean, they're sort of unsophisticated and out of step with modern life. They feed into kind of parallel myths about rural education, and those myths are that rural people really don't care about or value education, that they have no ambitions beyond staying in their communities, that they're not very able, that they're kind of parochial and their views are very short-sighted and kind of conservative and not plugged into the larger world.
Ed, would you say that these stereotypes are accurate?
Absolutely. You know, there are so many people that say to me, you know, you work in McDowell County. My goodness, why would you stay there? You know, we have the most wonderful people in the world. I have people say to me that, you know, your kids have never been across the county line. Well, that may be true. And as Caitlin said, you know, a lot of people do think that we stay where we are, you know, where we're raised, we live where we were born, that sort of thing. And they say you can't get here from there. And I disagree with that. Our kids are everywhere. You know, our rural kids grow up to be doctors, lawyers, just like anybody else. The stereotypes that you're talking about, I've encountered those myself. Well, you're from West Virginia. You know, do you wear shoes? That sort of thing. So, yeah, you'd be surprised just how many stereotypes that people have about rural West Virginians.
And one of the things we're going to talk about are some of the challenges, because I think you both would agree that there are rural challenges that do exist. However, there are also several strengths. And I know, Ed, we had dinner with some people last night, and we were talking about some of the strengths of rural education. And I know, Caitlin, you have some thoughts about this as well. What are rural strengths in education?
Number one are people. You know, we have some of the best teachers that I have ever encountered. We have teachers that are highly educated, and that's because they put a lot into it. We don't have the universities close by where we can get the advanced degrees easily as some of the other counties do. You won't find a lot of teachers every night heading off to their classes to get advanced degrees. We have to go get them, so to speak. I mean, it's a long way for me to drive to take a class, especially after I've worked all day long. Doesn't mean I'm not willing to do it, or any other teacher for that matter of fact. But we do have a lot of good people, a lot of good teachers. We have dedicated superintendents and assistant superintendents. Our principals, I think, have to be some of the most dedicated people in the world. Their challenges are like nobody else.
Caitlin?
I think that rural schools actually have a lot of the characteristics that critics of American public education look for. They tend to be very based on a lot of strong relationships, both among and between students and teachers and people in the community, because it flows pretty naturally from one of the strengths of rural communities themselves, which is that they're tight-knit, that people know each other in lots of different situations in a small community. Rural schools have also been, and I think this might surprise a lot of people, sources of innovation because they've had to be inventive by necessity. And so things like looping or multi-age classrooms or project-based learning originated in rural schools. Rural schools and their communities tend to have a lot of social capital, which has to do with trust, networks between people, helping, those kinds of things. And another thing that's really important about rural communities and their schools is that the people in them have a real strong sense of place. So they care about the place where they come from, and they steward those places accordingly.
In some conversations that we've had in the past, you told me the percentage of students that actually come from rural America, and I thought that that information was astounding.
Yeah, there are about 10 million kids in rural schools now. That's about 20% of the total national student population, so it's pretty significant.
So it's not just Appalachia.
No, rural is very diverse. It's all over the country. I mean, Appalachia is one kind of rural, but it's very different from a coastal village in Maine or you know, what the Great Plains look like, or a village in Alaska. There are all kinds of rural. Rural is very diverse.